And we are live. Who you work with and what you work on is more important than how hard you work. Ryan, I know book clubs are Friday, but you turned me on to a book yesterday that, or was it Sunday? I forget. Anyway, Sunday or Monday. Turned me on to a book that was absolutely outrageous. And I think I got 7 minutes in, including the intro, and then I rewound it. And then I got 7 minutes in, including the intro, and then I rewound it. And then I got 7 minutes in, including, and it's like I'm flabbergasted as to how cool this book is. And the first sentence that got me totally wired was, who you work with and what you work on are more important than how hard you work. And I mean, when you think about that, you know, who we work with, enjoying what we do every day, what we work on. So enjoying who we do it with every day, what we work on, enjoying what we do every day. How often that's overlooked.
Yeah.
Things like money. Overlooked for things like being able to work at home, overlooked for so many things, and yet it's really the nucleus of what makes us happy. I can tell you that in my career, my bad days usually come home as well as my good days, right? And I think a little less now, actually, when I really think about it. I think probably less now that I work at home. But I remember when I was working in an office, and like, no matter what was happening during the day, I kept telling myself, I'm not going to bring it home. I'm not going to bring it home. That's like such crap. You always bring it home. And so before we dive into it, what does that sentence mean to you?
It means a lot. I think, it's collaboration, right? And I think there's another, when you get further in the book itself, in the audio book, he talks about like everybody thinks that when you're at the top, or when you're going to the top, and your quote unquote competitors, that you guys are actually like in competition. But what people don't realize is that you guys are actually in collaboration most of the time. And I first saw that firsthand with you know Rogers and Bell, if anybody's here in Ontario, when they came together and they bought the MLSC, which is the Maple Leafs Sports Entertainment. So all like the Toronto Raptors, the TFC, the Blue Jays, and the Maple Leafs. And you think like, how can these two competitors, they spend, it's like Pepsi and Coke, and it kind of goes back to advertising from last week we talked about on positioning. But you look at these two things, and then you think like, you automatically think like, oh my God, these are competitors, they hate each other, they don't want to work. One wears red, the other wears blue. And then you realize that they're collaborating at the top, they're, and what I did some digging too. Some of the people on their board are people on the other board. I don't know if there's like a little bit something in cahoots, but that's not for me to decide. But who you work with is so important, and I think it changed over time because I started listening to this book on the weekend too, and for everybody who's watching right now, the book is The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. And if anybody knows him, he's an angel investor. He's like a billionaire. He just invests in companies and just sees returns. I think he was involved with Uber. He was involved with DoorDash, all those things like early, and like he cashed out, but he's legit like a billionaire, So,
and he's almost never even heard of.
Exactly, right? So I've heard of him because I've seen him on the Joe Rogan show, and then I've always kind of like wondered, okay, who is this guy and things like that. But then I don't know how I came across this, but for everybody who's watching out there, there's always one book or a series of books in your life that change you. And I'm gonna put this onto the universe. This book, this audio book, because I'm taking it as audiobook, I'll probably buy the book as well. This audiobook is gonna make me extremely wealthy. And I know that. And it's just not wealth when we talk like riches and money and all that stuff, like everything he talks about. So coming back to what you say, Dan, like, who you work with and what you work is more important than, how hard you work. And, I shared this with like my other inner circle that I have, which is like 3 other Toastmasters who I've just become extremely good friends with. And we share our daily wins. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is, and even in like the 7 minutes that you listen to, Dan, Naval really talks about I'm not the smartest person. I'm not the hardest working. Some people might think like I might be a little bit lazy and things like that. But you know what? It's once you kind of build that out, and there's so much. I sent it to you right away because I started listening to it and I'm like, holy crap, this has to do with Bridger, our CRM
Hmm.
software that we
Hmm.
have. And the one thing, I don't know if you've gotten to that point yet, but where he says that, hey, well, there's two big takeaways already. He's like, A, you should never be a salaried employee. You should always have like what is it, dividend on, and you should invest in company, right? So you make money while you sleep. You know, you're not trading your time for dollars. And another one that he really talked about that I sent to you was like, you know, he talks quite often about either if you're starting a company, you either know how to sell or you know how to build. And building is like coding and development, all that stuff. Or three, you got to get people to come and do that. And you know what? I'm gonna add another third one because this was important. I don't know if you, maybe I'm spoiling the book for you, but it doesn't matter. He talks about what your hourly rate is, you know, and I've set my
Yes.
rate. He's like, whatever your hourly rate is, like enforce it. So if you were $1,000 person, don't even think about what is it. If you were standing in line at like a store to return something, you're realizing like, I'm returning this $20 item. It's going to take me an hour of my time. My hourly rate is $1,000 or $100 or $200. Like, know your worth and then outsource
Yeah.
everything that doesn't fit. So he's like, even cooking, you know, he outsources everything. And I'm like, holy crap. Like, as a content creator, one of the things I personally don't like is truly like editing software, like, sorry, editing the content. You know, I like filming it, I like scripting it, I like doing all that stuff. And sometimes I have some fun playing on DaVinci. That's why I have this computer behind me. But I really don't enjoy the process of editing, especially with my podcast being like 30 to 60 minutes long. You know, you sit there and you're like, oh crap, it's like 2-3 hours. I'm like, you know what? What is my hourly rate? You know, I can pay an editor $100 an hour to get this done. I can pay them $300 and I know they'll get this done. And then that saves me over 3-4 hours of time, right? So coming back to today's topic and like who we work with, I think it's so important. You need direction rather than speed, right, Dan?
Yes, I totally agree with that. And you know, I love the fact that he comes, well, two things. So for starters, just so everybody understands, this book is actually somebody that assembled all
Yeah.
his tweets, his posts and everything, and assembled it in a format that he put into a book. And I thought that was like, for me, that was one of the first super cool things, is like, wow, that's pretty cool. I'm interested. And when you sent it to me, I did reading on it obviously right away. And I was like, I'm interested to see how this lays out, because people put, I think, a lot of their best stuff into content,
Mm-hmm.
and their best stuff into content.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've never seen a book created from somebody's content. But when it comes down to this, I wrote down the three things that kind of hit me right away. Um, so the first one, who you work with and what you work on are more important than how hard you work. The second is become the best in the world at what you do and keep refining what you do until this is true. I think that's pretty cool. So you're becoming the best at what you do. You're focusing on the recording. You're not trying to become the best editor.
No.
Right? I love editing. So I will edit as much as I can because I love the creativity that comes with editing. And then this is the third one, which ties right into that. And we'll bring this back to logistics in a second. Apply specific knowledge with leverage, and then eventually you will get what you deserve.
Yeah.
And I look at these three, Ryan, and I say, okay, logistics sales, who you work with, the company you work with, and what you work on, the freight you work on, is more important than how hard you work.
Yeah.
I'll agree with that hands down 100%. Becoming the best in the world at what you do and keep refining it until this is true. That to me is like, okay, if you're going to, I realized very early on in my sales career, I'm a grade 9 dropout. I realized very early on, I better get really good at this sales thing, because there's an opportunity for unlimited returns, whether that be personal freedom, financial. I mean, I've had the privilege of traveling to pretty much every state and province in North America on business. So, you know, there's all these bonuses in our industry, but we have to become the best at what we do without focusing on other people's lanes, right? Like you just said something at the beginning that was so important. You know, at the top, all of these huge brands that on the surface look like they're competing with each other.
Yeah.
Here's one thing that's become very clear in both listening to, and I know it sounds crazy, but the first like 8 minutes of this book and reading Positioning is like, if we go back to Coke and Pepsi, Pepsi drinkers are not Coke drinkers. Coke drinkers are not Pepsi drinkers.
Yeah.
There's enough people in every lane that need the service and product you have.
Yeah.
There is no competition. And some people might disagree with that, and that's fine. But I don't believe there is, because I believe in every market, no matter what, there's always people that are looking for what you're providing.
100%. Your audience is there. They're just, you know what? I tell that to a lot of people because, like, I think in my Toastmasters group and people who know me, I'm kind of like the podcast guy, right? Because I've shared, like, I do the show and then doing my own stuff, and then they see my content and stuff. So a lot of them come out to me and they're like, hey, you know, I want to start doing content. I want to start doing a podcast and stuff, but I feel like nobody would ever be interested in me. And the first thing I always say, I stop them right there, Dan, and I say the exact same thing. I'm like, you know what? There's somebody right now scrolling, or somebody that's looking for whatever content you're going to put out. They're waiting for you, you know, so do it. Don't worry about yourself, because I feel like we always kind of put ourselves into it. You know, that's our ego talking, that's our emotion talking. But when we kind of, and one thing that Naval talks about too, that I really liked was like, whatever you are really good at, give it away for free, because he talks about karma, and he's Hindu as well. So karma is with Hindu. And the third point that you made as well, right? You kind of give that away. Everything will happen the way it needs to happen as a karmic duty. So I think that is so important. You know, your audience is waiting for you. So as a logistics sales rep, you know, like, don't worry about the time, don't worry about the tenure, don't worry about anything. Just honestly focus on being better. Like you said, who you work with and what you work on, you know, like, you're not constantly looking at the websites. And Matt Dahl had a great LinkedIn post yesterday where he said that when he got into logistics, he did an interview with Steam. And Steam basically told him that, hey, man, we just want you to focus maximum like 10 to 20 accounts a day. You know, you'll only be making maximum like 20 calls a day. And he turned them down because he said, how am I supposed to build a business? You know, because he's come from sales, like door-to-door sales and like advertising, and it's a numbers game. And then he went to the second company, and then he realized, oh, it's not a numbers game, you know? So any freight brokerages out there, like, kudos to you if you're doing your spray and pray or you're doing 100 calls a day. You know, you're not going to beat the person who's like researching 10 companies and actually has the information, looked at investor calls, look at their DCs, know about their product, gone into a store and checked out what the product, how it felt, and all these things, right? So I love exactly the point that you just made, Dano.
You know, Ryan, I got to ask you about something, because you said something prior to what you just said that's really interesting. So when we said, you know, when you were talking about ego and how, you know, people come into it and they're kind of operating an ego, would you see that more as along the lines, and I've really been exploring this because I'm trying to separate the ego part from the way our brain thinks, right? And part of me is starting to realize that sometimes what we see as ego is actually just perspective, because the only perspective we have is our perspective.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. I'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit, and only because you mentioned it. So we're kind of going off the highway here.
Yeah, no. Well, here's one. Today we didn't plan. So, you know, with this book. So I think I've been doing a lot of research on like scarcity mindset versus like abundance mindset. Yeah. And you're gonna be so happy with saying that when I say what the next thing I'm gonna say. I'm really starting to like Bob Proctor. But
he is awesome. And I know you said he was a pasty white guy.
Yeah, but he's awesome, man. I'm you know, the law, like the universe has brought his in as I'm doing like more research on abundance mindset, and I think you know
he's sorry to interrupt you, but you know how you were talking about like 1 to 3 books. You know what we talk about, we're like 1 to 3 books. You stick with 1 to 3. Like Bob Proctor literally built his entire career off Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
See,
like this man read that book. He probably could have recited that book. Now, rest in peace, Bob. Amazing man. He probably could have recited that book. He built his entire career off 1 book.
See, and that's what I feel
One
like this
book.
book is gonna do for me. I hope it does the same thing for you as well. But the one that we're on right now, the what we're talking about right now, this is the one. Like I know it for a fact. You know, this is the one that's gonna
You just
change
had
my
that,
life.
like you got that feeling right when
I
you
got
started
that.
listening to it, or what was it that gave you that feeling? I'm really interested in
So
this.
it's like listening to the things, and you know what? It's hey man, it goes back to your logistics training too. Right message at the right time for the right person, right? So I was
Mm.
listening to this on my way to go do something, and you know, he was just dropping bombs after bombs after bomb. Sorry, that's insensitive to what's going on, but he was just dropping facts after facts after facts, and I'm like, holy minute. And then I realized like he didn't even write this book. Like, you know, this is not him. Like, this is not because like a lot of like if you do a biography or things like they're gonna fluff it up, right? This is literally his own words that he shared throughout his life, and he's got the credibility, right? He's an angel investor. He's living the life that I want to live. B, he's coming from like the same thing, like you said, his parents, they came from India, they were dirt poor. His dad had, I believe, he was a doctor, but because they didn't recognize his degree and all that stuff, I think he did some kind of like blue collar work. So money was always tight and things like that. And then he just started talking about his journey of what's worked for him. And then it's just, I don't know, it's something about this has been like just tying that with the abundance mindset and things like that. But coming back to your question, I want to get back into the ego and perception. You know, I think we are our biggest critics, if that makes sense.
Yes,
And
makes
you know,
total sense. Yep.
yeah, we got perception, we got our ego. But I think reading when we were reading that Eckhart Tolle thing, you know, I want people to understand that, you know, when we talk about ego, I don't think about ego in such a negative context, like it's the worst thing in the world. I think it's like that duality, right? I don't think we could ever really shed our ego. You know, it's gonna be if and you know we talk about competition quite a bit, you know, for me as we're doing this podcast, you know, my intention too is to give value, but a part of me is like I want to be the best podcast out there. I want to be the number one. You know, anything I want to do in life, Dan, I want to be the number one at what I do. So I
Mhm.
think when you're talking about perception too, because that is from our mind, but it kind of ties back into our scarcity mindset, right? Like your environmental things, right? Because I'd love to play in the sandbox here with you. Like you might have maybe a little bit of a scarcity mindset from what you went through last year because you realize how precious life actually is. You know, so
Mhm.
you could have been like, maybe I got scarcity here, but on the opposite side, I'm going to live my life to the fullest because not every
Mhm.
single day is guaranteed, right? So that's what I'm saying. That duality, you know, got the scarcity, you got the abundance, you know, you got ego, and what's the opposite of ego? Like, you know, humbleness, I guess it is, or down to earth.
Yeah,
But I
like
think they
ego to
work in unity.
ego.
Yeah, I think they work in unity, brother.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what? You're right. It was ego in my question that I just asked you. Ego was being played as a very negative way. But you're right. There is that duality in it, and you just yeah. I don't even. I'm kind of at a loss right now for words, Ryan, because you said it so well.
Yeah.
There's really nothing to add. You know, the fact that you want to become the best at everything you do, that's a big Bob Proctor thing. You know, he
Mhm.
said, like, if you're a garbage man, be the best garbage man on the planet.
Yeah.
You know, like really be the best at what you do. And this is something that you know, I've known, I've heard, you know, like I think it's normal. And I'm really focusing on that in probably the last 2 weeks.
Mm.
Um,
What's
you
changed?
know,
What's changed in the last 2 weeks for you, brother? Let's get into that.
it was so it was actually something very simple, but yet I looked at it and I went, wow. So I'm part of a snowmobile club out here where it's all volunteers.
Mhm.
And I was at not really an AGM, but a meeting of some of the top brass in the snowmobile club.
Cool.
And they said, hey, Dan, would you mind fixing the axle on the trailer? And I said, no, not a problem. Give me all the parts. I'll fix it. So I fixed the axle. And after I fixed it, they said, hey, can you mount something to the front of it that we're going to put plexiglass on so mud doesn't fly up into the trailer? And I
Yeah.
went, sure. So what I did is I looked at this beat up trailer and I said, okay, well, I'll just mount something here. So I'm going through all my steel and I had a pre-designed piece of steel and I'm like, oh, that'll work. So I put it on and I just welded it. Right.
Well,
And then about 3 days later, I got asked to bring the trailer to someone's shop. And so I brought the trailer to the shop and when it came out of the shop, he had cut the piece that I welded on. He'd cut it off, and he put this piece on, Ryan, that looked like it came out of like a professional manufacturing company.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and I looked at that and I said, why didn't I do that? Why did I just grab a piece of steel and mount it and weld it? And I started really thinking about it. And I said, why? Because I'm doing it in my garage and not at an actual company? Why? Because I didn't necessarily have the steel he had. Why couldn't I have made it or gone and bought it to build something that's professional? Instead, I was more on the line of get it out the door. And I realized that I've been doing that in many different areas. And, you go back to scarcity mindset, you go back to what I went through last year. And that's the mentality that I developed last year by saying, okay, just, you got to get through things and just get it done so you can get more done.
Push through. Yeah.
And I kind of set myself up for that failure. Do you know what I mean? And I'm looking at what he did and I went, whoa, like, can I do it? Yes. Would it have taken probably 2 hours more? Yes. But I didn't want to spend the 2 hours because in my mind, I've got so much else to do.
Yeah.
And I think that can destroy the success of every task or thing we come across. Like, I don't really want to say everything's a task, right? Because some of it, to me, 99% of my day is not a task because I love doing it. Yeah. So it's not really like a task for me, but I guess it's the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
So that's really where my mindset started changing a couple of weeks ago. In my graphic design, in my editing, I'm taking more time with these things to get them done to the best of my personal ability. And that way, even if I need to bring in somebody after.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, like that's.
It's like 85, 90% there, and then they just need to do the other 10%. So you're not I'm not leaving somebody like I did this gentleman with an absolute dog's breakfast. Yeah. Right? Like in my head, I'm thinking, and I won't even go there because I'm just trying to justify it. The fact is, I didn't do it in a professional manner. I just kind of put pieces on, welded it, and said, all right, there we go. And it's like out the door, it's out of my garage. Now I can move my snowmobile over and do my lights. And, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing, just more of that production line mentality, as opposed to saying, okay, well, maybe we're not building a Ford Model T. Maybe we're building a McLaren. Or maybe, so you go from those hand-built vehicles from the production line. Does that make sense?
Like, yeah, no, 100%. I think that makes so much sense, and kudos to you for actually like reflecting on that. And I think that ties in great into whenever you start listening to the other part where he talks about find out what your hourly rate is, and if it's below it, outsource it. No question about it. Because your time is, because people think that if I'm going to outsource my time itself, I'm just going to go and do nothing. It's not that. It's just that you can work on more important things, right? Work on the stuff that you're really like from this book, and coming back to you, it's just, okay, what are you really good at, and just double down on it. Even if it's a couple of things that you're really done. Like there's the whole, like, what is it? Jack of all trades, but master of none. You want to be a master of something. You want to be a jack of all trades. And I think the jack of all trades is like something for like our previous generation. Like I would consider my dad a jack of all trades in terms of, if I have a car issue, he can come fix it. If I have an issue with like our sink, he can come fix it. Like these were things that he's learned, like in his, like, for me, I I got soft hands, man. The hardest work I've ever done is worked in a factory, and I lasted 2 days. But like it's the things that we don't have, and I think
what, I'm grateful that you're saying that. Because, and you know what, Ryan, most people would not say that. So
I have no qualms about that, man.
I am that because that's how I grew up, was jack of all trades. Like I could do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
And it's, I've also mastered a few skills, but it's, so let me ask you this. So in this first part and what we're talking about today, because I know we're running out of time, what are you changing? What are you starting to think about more and either stop doing it or
Mhm.
get better at it?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So I listened to this on Saturday, and so today's what, Tuesday. So for me, right away was decide like my hourly rate. So for me, like for everybody who doesn't know, like I've been working from home for a really long time. So I actually got like a part-time gig at like a retail store just for fun. I work like 2 or 3 shifts. If on that, and that's just really to get to meet know people and things like that. But after I listened to this, I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna work any longer than a 4 hour shift. Anything over 4 hours for me, Dan, means that I literally like it's just not worth my time. While I'm saying this, it might seem like it's ego, but it's just like setting
Yeah.
that rate. So in my mind, I've already set my rate as as a certain number. If anything does not fit, so let's say I have to do this one task, like even if it's something I gotta do cold calling, Dan. It's not, I would never outsource this, but it is a conversation to bring up. Like I can hire somebody to do those to like do it like SaaS companies where they basically book appointments and then I got appointments on my calendar. Another
Yep.
thing as well that I got with this right away was, I have a Calendly link for everybody who wants to like book an appointment and stuff like that with me. It used to be Monday to Friday, and then I'd be like, okay, jumping from this to this to this. Like I'd wait for that 15-minute, that notification you get like 15 minutes before your meeting with so and so. I've closed my calendar except for Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it's only from 1 to 4 p.m. So if you want to get me, you're gonna have to book one of those days, even if it's up until next year. So I've realized that's like it's precious, it's more precious for my time. And you know what, like I said, the who you work with is so important. Like I said, I got my inner circle with the Toastmasters. We've already started talking about like holding events next year. We actually started planning one for like anti-Valentine's Day where we're going to hold something together and kind of go from there. Bridger as well. Bridger is something that I'm invested, I'm a co-owner of. So that's for me, that's my end game. That like, that's really what's gonna help me move to the thing, not being like a salaried rep or trade my time for dollars. Like as the company grows, I grow, you grow, our other owners grow, our users grow, everything like that. So understanding like that. And another mindset too is just like when that is somewhat complete in terms of like it's my time to maybe go off and do other things. It's like, okay, what's the next big challenge? What am I gonna go start a software company or like lead sale? Like it's so kind of cool to be something. Like I'm not thinking as I'm gonna be I'm an employee of a company. I'm gonna be, somebody who is a part of like the ownership. Somebody who's
Mhm.
invested in it and thinking about how can I make money while I sleep. Make it
Mhm.
automatic, right? And it's starting to happen already, brother. Like it's crazy once you start going, and start putting this stuff into action. You know this already. When you actually start taking massive action, how the universe conspires with
Oh,
you.
it just it all comes together. It
Yeah.
all comes, and then this is the big thing Brendan Burchard talks about is, when you're stuck, take a step forward.
Oh shit!
Like,
I like that one.
yeah, and he says it all the time. He says like, listen, like, no matter what you do when you're demotivated, step forward. Motion creates emotion.
Yeah.
Tony Robbins said it best when he said that, and it's that forward momentum when you're consistently moving forward. This is where everything changes.
Yeah.
Everything. And it's the ability to sift through, I'm going to say, and I don't know if that's the right wording, and maybe I'm getting my words rambled this morning, but your ability to sift through what's really holding you back,
Mm.
you know, and that for me anyways, and love your thoughts on it. For me, it's that reiteration that works best.
Yeah.
So repetition is the first law of learning, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? So repetition in what you're doing is how you learn. Repetition if you're going to edit, repetition in getting in front of the camera and hitting record, right? As you continue to do this, you get better and better and better and better at it. Now, there's also a secondary portion of that, in number 2, where it says becoming the best in the world at what you do. That's intentional,
Yeah.
right? So your desire to achieve outstanding results, the desire to achieve more in a year than most people do in a decade. This is going to drive you to new thoughts. It's going to drive you to being scared out of your bloody tree, which is a really good thing. And, if you're getting it more into Bob Proctor, you'll know that, because that scared, that feeling, that anxiety, that fear is actually a great feeding system for achieving outstanding results. And, you know, it's in everything, Ryan. It's like, okay, am I afraid of making that? And so, perfect example. And I'm trying not to jump here, but I think I am.
It's all good.
Had a call with a student yesterday, and he's been off of sales for a long, really successful, but kind of did what most people do in our industry. When they get really successful, they stop selling.
Yeah.
And they start like working in operations or like, you know, digging deeper into the customers they have. And so, long story short, over a couple of different things, changed companies and didn't quite bring all of the freight with him when he changed. So now he's gone from here to like here, right? From a numbers perspective. Yeah. So he's like, I haven't sold in like 5 years because he was doing so well. So it's this whole new, like, how do you sell? So I was like, well, the first thing I would do if I were getting into sales now is do video. It's the first thing I would do. So I said, you know, I got him on SendSpark, and I said, you know, like, even just get the free account, use it a bit. So he sent me, and congratulations to him, he sent me his first video yesterday. And we had the conversation because it was a holiday where he was. And I said, who cares? Are you in the office right now? And he says, yeah. I said, then go for it. Now is your golden hour, right? Yeah. We get that from Jeb Blunt. Now is your golden hour. Do it. And so he sent me a video, and he was like in a hat backwards and in a sweater. And I said, so all you do is you tell the prospect, hey, it's a holiday here, but I wanted to get this video message out to you. And that's why you're dressed the way you're dressed, right? Like, you don't even have to say, this is why I'm dressed the way I'm dressed. You just reference it. And he got like 52 videos out yesterday. And he got like 20 replies. And he's like over the moon. And I go, you see? It's so for me, it would be like, get really good at that. Get really good at like one or two things. And, you know, those are your catalysts. Those are your nucleus of your success. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. No, you got to start. You're building your foundation, right? Yeah. So kudos to that student yesterday for actually like putting action in 52 videos. Cool. Like, for everybody who's watching out there, they're thinking like, for me, I can't even get through like 10 videos a day, you know, like it takes a lot, you know, but with amazing software like SendSpark, you know, they make it easy for you when you utilize the platform and everything like that perfectly, rather than just putting on your camera and just start talking, right? But like,
and he actually inspired me, Ryan, yesterday to do a whack of videos. I think I got through 42 yesterday after he sent me his thing. And here's the thing, and you know, shameless plug, with Bridger, the ability to just click the user's profile and bring you right to their LinkedIn page. Then you hit the SendSpark icon in Bridger to start recording. So literally within 2 clicks, I'm recording a video message on their LinkedIn page that I'm emailing to them. And super cool, brother. It's like revolutionary. I literally went through, did 42 or 43 videos in I think an hour and a half, which is pretty cool considering it's like record, insert, record, insert, record, insert. And it's like, it was so smooth, Ryan. And it just felt so natural. And this camera was on and I was like, da-da-da-da-da, click, click, da-da-da-da, click, click, da-da-da. And it was so cool. And, you know, it's, that's the applying specific knowledge with leverage to eventually get what you want and you deserve. Right? Like, it's that specific knowledge and creating that leverage because you're doing it over and over and over again. It's a competence circle, right? So confidence creates competence then creates more confidence, and it just keeps looping around and around. And that's how the rings of a tree, in my opinion, grow. And that's how we become solid, like the base of an oak tree. Make sense?
100%, buddy.
Sweet. What do you got to close this out, brother? What do you got?
I thought that was going to close this out, man. Everybody get the friggin' book, man. Get the book. It's going to change your life. It's changed my life. It's changed Dan's life. It's changed everybody that I've sent this to. Yeah. What is it called? The Almanac of Naval Ravikant? We'll pop it in there.
The Almanac of Naval Ravikant.
Yeah. Get it, man. It's going to change your life.